Hello, and thanks for joining the session. Today we're going to start a new project working with event sourcing using Laravel and EventSauce. We're going to be building an application called Stalker. I've already done a little bit of the planning of the project, but I haven't actually started any code. So as you can see here, we did a mini event storming session with my partner in crime, um, who's actually the domain expert for this application we're going to be building. So probably in another session or so, we're going to get to the point where we can actually start looking at the actual domain so we can have a better idea of what's actually going to be built. But in the meantime, you can know that it is actually going to be in the meantime, you can know it is actually going to be a real live application that we will be working on. So it sort of talks about our goals. The first thing we're going to do, our first goal is build an inventory management system. We're going to name it Stalker. I can't remember if it was Jonathan or Oliver, one of our viewers, said that Stalker shouldn't have the E if I actually want it to be useful or have a chance of actually working well. So we're going to build an app called Stalker. We're going to use Laravel as the base application. This could have been Symfony. This could have been something like Zen Expressive. But I am just going to be working with Laravel. I've been doing a little bit more Laravel lately, and I'd like to learn how to use it a little better. So I'm going to use Laravel for the base application. For the event store layer, I'm going to use a package called EventSauce. And we're going to take a look at that real quick here. I don't know why I didn't click. There we go. So EventSauce is a standalone event store implementation. So if you want to add event sourcing to PHP without having to worry about learning the whole event sourcing and CQRS landscape, EventSauce is a good way to actually do that. So it looks like someone in chat, Laravel, says, quite interested in event sourcing. They've been doubting about this at the office because it turned out to not be relevant for their use case. We'd love to find out a little bit more about that. Like, what was your use case? Why did you think event sourcing might have been a good fit, and why did you decide it wasn't? Because I think that's something that a lot of people aren't sure about. So I'd love to hear more information from people about why they're tuning into this session. So EventSauce, the way that the author decided to build this library is to just be the event store component. So the actual library itself is pretty basic in terms of features and functionality. It does everything it needs to, but there's at least one of these. Let's see, rebuilding projections. I always love this particular page because rebuilding projections is something that I think comes up pretty quickly as soon as people start actually using projections with event sourcing, and they're very clear that EventSauce doesn't even bother tackling it. So that's actually part of one of the goals here. It's towards the bottom. So I'll talk about it now since it came up on Event Store with EventSauce. Another goal is that I want to build a standalone projections package. This is something that is in some of the full stack event sourcing CQRS frameworks in PHP, but it's not something that sort of exists as a standalone component. So if you look at event store implementations like EventSauce, there isn't a standalone implementation for something that can process streams of events or streams of messages and build a projection out of them. So I'm hoping that that's something that we're going to be able to do as a part of this, is start sort of building that as its own package that can be reused by other people who want to use EventSauce or want to have their own custom event store implementation or want to use it with proof or any of these other event sourcing CQRS packages in PHP. Also, I want to use Eloquent ORM for parts of the read model. So the projections themselves will probably be writing for the most part to just straight up Eloquent ORM models. So if you're familiar with Laravel, hopefully you'll be able to see this as well. So I see here more feedback on the event sourcing comment earlier. That was for a client project, which was a mortgage company. But the dossiers are getting updated all the time. So it sounds like it might be um, what often happens when you start working with event sourcing as a concept. You find out that some of the domains are mostly CRUD, or at the very least, as the create, read, update, delete. Um, and event sourcing can be a little weird in those sorts of situations. It's not necessarily appropriate for domains where people are just used to and want to just have one big form where they can update any field at any given time. So it sounds like that might have been the case there, but I'd love to see if we can maybe look at these problems a little differently with this particular project. I want to build a command bus around Tactician. Tactician is a command bus implementation on the PHP League. Let's see here. Command buses are actually not that difficult to build, but I don't want to actually worry about that. So what I'm going to do is build my own command bus interface, or actually implementation, and it's going to be backed by Tactician. So it's going to be able to leverage most of Tactician's bells and whistles that it has, but with a UX that, or developer experience that I'm going to experiment with here. So that actually comes to the end of the main goals. Sort of the sub goals is that I want to try and take this project and experiment with some things to make the developer experience a little better. In the past, when I've worked with any sort of event sourcing or CQRS style projects, they tend to get very verbose, and I want to see if I can do something to sort of not do that this time. So we're going to see what we can do. If you are actually coming from a more strict DDD, domain-driven design background, some of the stuff that I'm going to experiment with might not actually be all that pleasing, but hopefully we can work through it and see if this is something that is actually useful. So what I'm going to do is, for this particular session, let's see, goals, tasks. So for this one, let's do create the Laravel project, and then bring in EventSauce. And in the process, we'll take a look at sort of how that package actually works. And then if there's time, we'll bring in Tactician. There we go. So we'll bring in Tactician and start building the command bus. So I don't know if we're going to be able to get through all of that in this particular session, but that sort of gives you an idea of where we're heading. So first things first, I'm going to bootstrap a brand new application. So let's go here. Supernova says, I can't wait to see you configure Homestead with a big smiley face. I don't think I'm going to be configuring Homestead. I'm a Valet fan these days. Laravel Valet, so that people know what this is. It's a lightweight hosting environment for localhost that is not Vagrant, so it's not going to be something like Homestead. So we'll see how this actually looks. If you haven't tried Valet before and you are on a Mac, this is actually a pretty nice way to get up and running. So I'm actually going to go back to installation and just go, I'm going to do the create project. So we're going to do create project of Laravel. And we're going to do Stalker. All right. This is going to be inventory management, stock management application. So that's what we're calling it, Stalker. And let's run this. While that's running in the background, I'm going to go ahead and get back to the EventSauce project. So let's go to installation. The main package here, Zaire on is saying that Valet plus Docker is a great stack to use. I've not actually done Valet and Docker in the past. Would be curious to know how to do that. I should look that up because Docker is something that I've been wanting to get on my stack of tools that I want to use. So if I can use Valet and Docker together, that would actually be pretty cool. So installing EventSauce is just going to be adding one dependency. They do have a doctrine message repository, which we'll take a look at. And I don't think we're actually going to use this. And I have a very specific reason why not. And we'll look at that when we're actually looking at the repository itself. So the only thing we're going to bring in is the core application, or the core library. And there's also RabbitMQ bundle bindings. I don't know what that is or if I need it. So I'm going to have to look at this one to see exactly what it does. But really, the main thing I'm looking for is the core package. So let's see if our project is ready. Awesome. So we're going to go to Stalker. And then we're going to, oh, I didn't copy it. There we go. All right, so we're going to bring in EventSauce next. So Zahir is saying they use Valet for Nginx and Docker for MySQL and anything else. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that is, I actually have done that. I was running Event Store on a previous project in Docker, or had tried to before actually running it. I ended up running it just locally or natively on Mac. But yeah, that is a nice way to bring up services so you don't have to actually have them installed on the Mac itself. All right, so this package is installed. So that's pretty much where we needed to be for that. So let's go ahead and see what's next. So event sourcing, this kind of gives you an idea of the general idea of what event sourcing is. I don't think there's really good examples on here. Maybe in the projections, let's see. Projections and read models. This might actually be an easier way to do this. So if we look at the types of events we have, let's say we're doing something with like relationship modeling. These are the events that might be sent. So friendship request was sent. So it's a domain event that somebody had sent a friendship request. That person could then potentially cancel the event. The recipient could accept it, or the recipient could deny it. So what you end up with event sourcing is a list or a stream of these events that all represent the ongoing history of a particular friendship request in this case. So there's no state. There's no persistent state of what the friendship request looks like, except for playing from beginning to end. I think the canonical example people will use for event sourcing is finances. So bank, for example, will not keep track of your total balance in your account. Instead, it keeps a ledger of all of the debits and credits into and out of that account. So event sourcing is similar in that respect. Read models then are how you can do useful things with them. So here we can actually see how these events could be handled. So here we have the pending invitation projection. It's going to look at all of the events that it receives. And then for any of the friendship requests was sent, it's actually going to add an invitation to, I guess the pending invitations would probably be like a repository. If the event was friendship was canceled, then it's going to update the status to request status canceled. If its friendship request was accepted, and then if it was denied, it's going to actually remove the request. So here, when we look at this invitations repository, it could actually have a proper traditional database table backing it. So there could be an invitations table that you could then query on the read model side of things. So this would be the equivalent of like seeing the balance on your bank account. Uh, Adding up all of the debits and credits would give you the total balance. So hopefully this, if you're somewhat new to event sourcing and some of these concepts, I would recommend taking a look at the event sourcing page itself on EventSauce, or looking at, let's see, where was that? Projections and read models, because projections and read models gives you a pretty good idea of what needs to be done. Okay, so event sourcing, architecture. The main things that we're looking at for EventSauce is the aggregate root repository, the message repository, and the message dispatcher. This is where, all right, let's see here. Core concepts, aggregate root. So the aggregate root in domain-driven design, it's sort of the thing that controls everything around an instance of a model. So usually this is probably just going to be what you would consider your primary model. So the aggregate root represents an instance. So for example, a friend request could be an aggregate root on its own that has a life cycle, it has identity. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about aggregate root. The repositories, the aggregate root repository actually is where you can work with the aggregate roots themselves. So you can persist an aggregate root, or you can load the aggregate root. So it looks like for EventSauce, aggregate root. So in order to build an aggregate root, it needs to know the class name. So this would be the name of the model that we're building. So friend request, for example. Message repository. So this is where it gets the previously recorded events. So this is where the events are persisted in the message repository, and then it plays those messages back from the message repository to build up its own state again. Message dispatcher. So this looks like this is an optional component. So this, I think, is if you want to have the aggregate root repository be able to dispatch messages when the aggregate root itself is saved. So we'll have to look into that a little bit more, but might not worry about it just yet. Message repository. So this is the connection to the persistence layer, responsible for storing and retrieving events. So this is where those events we looked at earlier, like friendship request, what was sent, was canceled, was deleted, and was denied, and was accepted. So those events are going to be serialized. Well, don't have to be, but for most of our implementations that you would ever use in the real world, they'll be serialized and stored somewhere. So that's what this is responsible for. Sending messages to consumers. So consumers then would be either projections, which we already talked about, or process managers. And I think probably there's some other generic things, essentially something that will handle those events when they're actually persisted. Message decorator. This is a way to take the raw messages that are being generated by the aggregate root and adding additional information on them. So this could be attaching the authorized, or not the authorized, the authenticated user that caused this event to occur. That might not be something that is a first-class part of the domain. In the case of friendship request, it would be. But let's say if you want to tag all of your events so that you know which IP address was used to create those events. So you would know when Beau created the friendship request, or when Beau sent the friendship request to Jane, then Beau did that from a specific IP address. So you'd be able to add additional bits of data onto those messages that aren't a part of the message itself. Those are things that will go on every single message, or optionally on messages. Message serializer, this is going to be something that will probably be somewhat important for us to take a look at. Most things are probably going to be JSON based, so we're actually going to go with JSON as well. So I want to look at the serializer to see how well it works or how it's configured. If it's super trivial, then we just might use it as is. If it requires more boilerplate or something a little more heavy, we might actually build a custom serializer for our event store implementation. Time. So time is something that is going to be interesting because I haven't actually had first class time or clock as a part of my event sourcing infrastructure in the past. So I'm not exactly sure how we're going to use this, but I think it's pretty cool that it's there. So these are sort of the main pieces that we're going to have to build on EventSauce in order to make something useful. Lifecycle, let's see what's here. So this gives us an idea of how we actually would work with the aggregate routes. So this is the aggregate route. You get it from the repository by its ID. The ID is going to be UUIDs, I believe, in most cases. And so all of the objects are going to be retrieved like this. Aggregate route performs some action. So this would be like cancel, accept or deny. And then what you would do is persist it. So repository persist aggregate routes. What that is going to do is look to see which events it had already had when it was loaded or when it was retrieved, and then it's going to update the event store with all of the messages that were received afterwards. So here we're looking at these performing actions, guard basic rule, and then record that some action was performed. So this is how new events are created. Actually handling those. So apply some action was performed. This is where you would actually update the state. So everything that comes in to the object that causes some sort of state change should actually be handled by an event. So the event says what's going to happen. So we'll take a look at that in more detail once we have a meaningful model to look at, but these are the pieces that we're going to be working with. Reacting to events, these are consumers, and so we've already talked a little bit about the consumers. Let's see here, all headers. Yeah, so this would give you the ability to then do something based on the message that came in. You'd be able to look at the headers. This is where if we wanted to say like X request IP or X browser name or something along those lines, we'd be able to get that information out and do stuff with it. The message itself, we could get the payload, which would be the actual object that, or the actual structure for the object that we're working with here. So lifecycle, let's see here. So getting started. So let's go ahead, aggregate root behavior. All right. Needs to implement the aggregate root ID interface. All right, so this is kind of a bummer, but that's fine. Actually having first class names for IDs, I'm willing to do that just because I think it'll make our life a little bit easier. But I don't think I'm going to be creating, I don't think I'm going to be creating a lot of value objects just yet for everything. I want to get stuff working. I want to see if we can do this more quickly than I've been able to do event-sourced applications in the past. All right, so events, creating the events. This is where it's going to be a little interesting that I want to look at this in a little more detail. So event serialization has to payload and from payload. Let's see if they have defining events. So we can do it manually. I think I want to do it manually. So let's see here. So some event implements serializable event to payload. So This is the function, or this is the method that will be called to convert the object, or to convert some event into the payload that will then be serialized as JSON, is sent along as a part of the message. When it comes back out of the event store, it's going to come back as unserialized JSON, so it will just be an array. And then we need to return a new instance with the information. So the thing that I'm not sure about, I've been experimenting with some things to try and make life a lot easier. And I think I don't know if I'm going to do anything but actually work with this payload. So we'll see if we can do something with that. The other option, if you are feeling more verbose, there is a way to build scaffold. Let's see, I guess it's generation, generating the classes. So here we have Acme Business Process, defining a command name subscribe, and then events, user subscribe to mailing list. You can specify the fields. The string, or the type is string in this case. And then you can do an example, and then it will actually generate this code for you. So essentially what I was getting at earlier is this implements from payload here and to payload here. But this is more complicated than I want to deal with. It's probably the right way to do it, which is why the scaffolding and the code generation is pretty nice. But I'm not actually going to go this far. If you see here, user subscribed to mailing list, it actually casts payload username mailing list to strings. It's created a constructor for you with private properties, and then implemented getters, and let's see here, some width values. So it allows you to create a new instance of user subscribed to mailing list, but with different values. So otherwise, these objects are actually supposed to be immutable. Yeah, so this is where things can get a little hairy. This is a lot of boilerplate, so I'm going to see if we can try and trim that out by just doing some things that are kind of nasty, at least to get going, and then see if it's a viable option to work that way. All right, so let's see here. Configuring persistence. So this is where we're going to have to look at the Doctrine message repository. So I'm going to go there in just a second, but first I'm going to check out Bootstrap. Message repository and dispatcher. So as long as we have those two, we can do a constructing aggregate root repository, pass in the class name of our aggregate root, and then pass in our message repository and our message dispatcher. But I believe the message dispatcher is optional. So I think we can start. So let's go ahead and take a look here. All right, so the project has EventSauce. I'm going to do some, I'm going to bring up the IDE. So let's do, okay, so I don't know how to open up PHP Storm from a specific location. So this will be interesting. I don't remember which project I had open last. There we go. I broke PHP Storm, yes. Thanks, Supernova. All right, so we're going to open the new project. All right, let's go to code. Open this window. All right, so don't ask again. Enable with auto. Okay, So what we have out of the box is an app directory. So this is where we're going to have the core Laravel application. One of the nice things that I like about Laravel versus, say, Symfony 4 directory structures, that means that the source directory, mostly call it pstorm for the command line. Mostly they call it pstorm from the command line. Maybe that's a alias that I need to set up, or something else. I'm fine now that it's up. So anyway, so Laravel applications put the core application in app. That means that I have full control now of building everything I want into source. So I'm going to do that. Let's do composer JSON. May need to recreate the shell scripts. All right. Yeah, I'm not going to worry about that. I don't want to see this. Okay. So let's go ahead and configure our PSR4 rules. And let's do Stalker in source. And let's see. Let's just do that for now. So that'll let me at least get started. So let's do source, and let's do model. And so if we look at the thing here, let's see, created stock. Pretty sure we had a top level catalog. And I can actually double check real quick. I took pictures of our event storming session, which was useful, but not useful here. So let's see. List created. Okay, and then we have items. So we're going to do catalog is going to be our repository. So in EventSauce, let's see. I wonder if I even need. Yeah. Let's see if we can do this. So I'm going to call this catalog. And I am going to extend, was it constructing? No. Constructing aggregate root repository. Huh. I wonder if it's final. I bet it's final, which is not going to make me happy because I'm not going to be able to do what I want. And doing what I want is what's important. Let's see. There's other ways I can do this if that's the case, but it's just a little annoying. Source. Yep, it's final. Awesome. Okay, so not sure why. I guess, let's see here. What does this aggregate root repository look like? So the problem is that it's final, so I can't extend it. All right. I guess this is fine. So I'm actually going to make this be an interface. I'm going to find, and I'm going to find this by, we'll do find item. that's going to return an item. So item is actually going to be our aggregate root. The catalog is just going to be, actually let's not do find, let's do, there we go. And then we'll do item, and this one will be void. Yes, Laravel. Just noticed that EventSauce was made by Frank de Jonge. I think I said that right. And says he's the Dutch guy as well, so I'm guessing Laravel is also Dutch. So yeah, this is one of Frank's projects. I've talked to him about it a couple of times, so I'm excited to actually be working with it. All right, so I should have just done this. I don't know why my brain was thinking differently, but essentially we're going to be creating an interface and then using composition to bring in the other dependency for the actual event store repository. I thought I could just do this quick and dirty. This might not bode well for the rest of what I'd hoped to do, but we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to do adapter just because I know right away. I kind of wanted to avoid creating interfaces until I knew I needed multiple implementations, which hasn't been something I normally do. I usually interface and create one implementation and then I never create any others. I wanted to avoid it if I could, but it doesn't look like that's going to be the case, at least in this situation. So I'm going to create an adapter for EventSauce. And let's see here. Let's do new EventSauce catalog. Implement catalog. Let's see, what do we call these? These were aggregate root repository. So we can't actually extend aggregate root repository, or the constructing aggregate root repository, but that doesn't really matter. But we can pass one in. It just means that we'll have to wire it up in our service provider to actually get it going. Create our constructor. Oh, that's not what I meant to do. There we go. And then we'll implement our simple methods, and then we can do this. So this aggregate root repository retrieve item ID. And so that's giving us an error because we haven't defined this yet, but this needs to be an aggregate root ID implementation. So let's go ahead and do that now. So let's go back to catalog, create a new class called item ID, and we will implement, actually, let's see if there's an implementation. Yeah, great. Can I use that? It's final. All right, let's see here. So you get root ID. toString. Let's do from string. I'm going to use support ordered UUID. Let's see, what does this return? I think it returns a Ramsey UID interface. I think we only need the string, so I'm just going to leave it like that. So let's do var string. Constructor. We're going to make our constructor private. Declaration must be compatible. What IDE is this? Supernova 7.2 forking EventSauce and marking nothing final. And yeah, so Laravel is asking which IDE this is. It is PHP Storm. I've configured it to be minimal so that hopefully it's easier to actually look at and watch. So I disabled as much stuff as I possibly could. And I've been trying to get used to some of the keyboard commands so that I can navigate without having to actually move around with the mouse for everything anyway. All right, so from string, why is this? Oh, it's not returning. Maybe that's it. Here we get root ID. Why is that a problem? toString. Let's do this. toString. Root ID from string. Oh, I think that is, I think I need to make sure that it's on the right version of PHP. There we go. Why can't I change it? Synchronize with Composer JSON. Right. All right. So let's just go ahead and do PHP 7.3. There we go. So it's nice when tools do things like that, but also would be nice just to be able to switch it. Let's see here. As soon as this updates, I think we can go in. This package requires... Really? There, so you can just define the local PHP CLI. Yeah, I suppose I could do that too. CLI, no interpreter. Yeah, it's still synchronizing the actual language level, even though I have hooked it into PHP 7.3 as PHP. All right, let's see if that fixes. No. It's probably gonna have all sorts of bad repercussions. I wonder if I can disable composer synchronize there. Let's do that. Now it shouldn't matter. There we go. No, I wonder if this is public static function. Oof. Not liking that. You know what? I guess we don't do that anymore. All right, so I need to find out why this is being complaining. From string, root ID, EventSauce. I'm gonna try firing it up again and see if that works. Sorry, root ID. So that just should work. I don't understand. From string. No, that's the interface. Well, if anybody watching has any ideas on this, that would be useful. In the meantime, I'm going to see if I can work on the other stuff. So we'll go back to EventSauce catalog. Item ID actually works. You can see that we can pass that in. We can pass it into the aggregate root repository to retrieve it. Item doesn't exist, so let's create that real quick. Just going to create the bare amount of stuff. So let's do item. That needs to extend something. So aggregate root just needs to implement aggregate root. And then there's the behavior. There we go. So in theory, that's all we need for that part of it. So EventSauce catalog. Let's return this. I hate having to do extra stuff like that to make the IDE happy, but it does tend to make me feel better in the end, because then I know when there are actually errors, they're actually errors. Save item then is this aggregate root repository persist item. Object aggregate root. What's this saying? Yeah, there must be something weird about these packages because it looks like it's using the object type hint. Maybe it could just be the IDE complaining when it doesn't need to. Strict types. Strict types. Type hint. When was this? 7.2. Hi there. Looks like XPT. Wondering about the IDE. I'm using PHP Storm. And it seems to only be with these packages it's complaining because it looks like it thinks object is in the namespace of the so here EventSauce, eventsourcing object. It's almost like it expects it to be this. I'm gonna try editing these anyway. It shouldn't need to be like this. Let's see if that, yeah, so that fixes it, but I don't think that should be required. I'm not sure. Usually, I don't think you have to do that. Because I don't remember doing that. Let's do same thing here. Yeah, look, Supernova saying it looks like it might be a PHP Storm bug, which is annoying, but happens sometimes. I've been having weird issues with PHP Storm anyway, so it could be that. Let's see. Brew install. Does that work? Reinstall. Yeah, if you really were there, it would work. Libicu. Why is it looking for 63? Zayer's asking if they can ask what I'm trying to install. At this point, PHP. When I tried to switch my system PHP from PHP 7.2 to 7.3, it just worked. Usually, but lately I think those scripts aren't working quite like I'd expect. So PHP 7.3 was already installed, and the problem that I'm seeing here is if I run PHP, well, now it's working, which is good. But at least for a little while, wow. Installing Python? working fine in Hosted. Thanks for that, Supernova. Wait pair config PHP 7.3. Okay, let's see if this works. Now it works, so I can run Composer. So again, I ran my little command to switch me to PHP 7.3, which was already installed, and everything broke. So now it's back to normal. And we have 5 minutes left. So let's see if we can at least get something up and running. So let's do app service provider. So the piece that we need to do now is we need to register something to actually wire things up correctly. So if we look back at EventSauce, the way that it said that we needed to use it was this new constructing aggregate root repository can't be extended. So what we need to do is create a singleton. Yeah, let's do a singleton. So we'll do this app singleton. So we are going to wire up anytime we're looking for an instance of catalog. So our catalog interface, container, we are going to want to return, well, no, I'm going to back this up a bit. We don't have to go that far. This app, when catalog needs, so what is it going to need? So if we look at our catalog interface, all right, got to back it up a little bit. So singleton, creating a singleton of our adapter. So EventSauce catalog is going to be a singleton, which is good. And we're going to bind catalog to EventSauce catalog. So anytime our application asks for the catalog class, we are going to give the EventSauce catalog. We're going to, let's actually do, I think we can do this in one now that I think about it. So we can just do that. So there's only going to be one instance of catalog ever, because we don't really need to, we can just keep those running. So when the concrete class, so when the EventSauce catalog So if we go to the EventSauce catalog, it needs an aggregate root repository. So when it needs an instance of aggregate root repository, we should give, and this is where we can do this, and copy this bit of code. That's not what I wanted to paste. So now we can do constructing aggregate root repository. We're going to specify the aggregate root class name. So that's going to be item. So the item is the aggregate root. So we're going to say item class. So expected. Yeah, it's still doing the same thing here too. So we'll have to just see. And then we need to specify the message repository and the message dispatcher. So let's see, let's do message repository. Let's just wing it. We'll do the in-memory version. So we'll do new, just to see if we can at least wire everything up and it works correctly. I'm not going to do anything with the message dispatcher just yet. So what we've done is we created our catalog interface. So this is all of our domain our own naming convention. So we have find item, save item. Item itself implements the aggregate root from EventStore, or from EventSauce, and aggregate root behavior gives it a bunch of stuff that we're going to be able to access. Item ID is a simple implementation of a UUID aggregate root ID, which I'll probably extract this a little bit. And then we have the actual implementation. So this is where we hook EventSauce into our names, into our domain. So EventSauce catalog, we need an aggregate root repository in order to actually work. We look back at our app service provider now, we can see that we have wired up that catalog. So our root catalog here is going to be handled by the EventSauce catalog. So anytime something type hints catalog, it's going to give an EventSauce catalog. We had to do something a little special because EventSauce catalog needed something that sort of has to be constructed on the spot. So here we can see this app. When EventSauce catalog needs an aggregate root repository instance, then we are going to create a new constructing aggregate root repository. So let's see, artisan. Let's do artisan make command wiring. Okay, so we can do artisan wiring. You know, this is, I think it probably didn't name it. Yeah, command name. Awesome. I think it named it right. Commands wiring. Yeah, this is where a little bit of inconsistency kind of annoys me in how the make stuff works. Signature, we'll do just wiring, and then construct this. Let's get rid of the constructor actually. Let's do catalog. And build a constructor. All right. So really, this should just work. Okay, cool. So, typelet declaration object must be unqualified. So yeah, I think there's a PHP storm bug which really annoys me because this is the code that I changed in EventSauce itself. So if we go to aggregate root ID, change that back, and if we go to aggregate root repository and change those back, now what do we have? Must implement aggregate root repository null given. Oh, I think what it's saying is that this is when EventSauce catalog is created, when it tries to get an aggregate root repository instance, it's getting null, which we went through all this work to not have that be the problem. The problem is I'm not returning it. So the error is a little weird, but it is actually telling me exactly what the problem is. So that works. So it looks like we didn't get through quite everything that I was hoping to today, but we did create the Laravel project. We did bring in EventSauce, and we have actually started to wire everything up to get at least one of our domain model sections started. Now there's a lot of actual modeling that we have to do in here, but the main goal for today was just trying to make sure that we could at least get this basic level of stuff started. So I was able to take a look at the photos I had of our event storming session to figure out the right name for at least the repository. So in this case, it's catalog and the items. So thank you for joining. Looking forward to seeing you all again next week.